A very good evening and welcome to our very first episode of our special series, The State of Our Nation. Now, for the next 4 weeks, we'll be bringing you news, reviews and debates, big issues coming out of our national and provincial legislatures, as well as municipalities. President Jacob Zuma set the ball in motion last week when he delivered the first State of the Nation address of the 5th Parliament. Now, parliamentarians, young and old, feasted on the president's speech. Now, in our show today, we look at the debut performances of Cyril Ramaphosa, Mmusi Maimane, and Julius Malema and ask, are they the future? Now, before I introduce you to our studio panel, just look and listen to this excerpt from an interview I had with the Deputy President this past weekend.
The low level of investments is a key constraint to economic growth. We are determined to work with the private sector to remove obstacles to investment. We would like to see the private sector showing as much confidence in the economy as the public sector.
Is it your view, is it the government's view that business is not playing ball?
Well, what the president was saying is the public sector is investing massively in the economy of our country. And there has been an assertion that the private sector at some stage has gone on strike in as far as investing further in our economy. And what he was essentially doing...
And sitting on trillions of rands.
Indeed. What he was essentially doing is to make a call on the private sector that we as the government are showing enormous confidence in the economy of our country. We would like you to do likewise and invest in the economy, because one of the key constraints that holds us from having increased growth is low investment. So the public sector is responding. We want the private sector to respond as well.
I don't know, Mr. President, who once said this, that when people say they have rights, they generally mean that they are suffering wrongs. In other words, when the president says we need you to show as much commitment as we are showing,
yes,
it is suggesting to me that business is not doing that.
What he's suggesting is that he wants to see increased investment. They are investing, but we need to see increased investment by the private sector. Like the public sector, the investment level had tapered off, had gone slightly down over the years. So it is now kicking up, it is increasing. And the president is similarly saying, we want you as the private sector to invest more so that we can jointly create jobs, we can jointly inject growth into our economy.
What in your analysis are the reasons business is not investing as it should?
Well, there are quite a number of reasons. One of them are some of the reasons that the president cited. The energy constraints that we face as a country impact on all role players in the economy, and particularly business or the private sector, which accounts for 70% of employment in our country. So they say, for as long as the energy is constrained, we are not able to build the factories, to do all what we need to do.
So you're saying it's not for lack of willingness on the part of business?
Well, it's a mixture. It's a mixture. So they cite that, which is what the president has addressed. There's also a lack of skills. There's also a low demand. Now, all these are reasons that can be addressed if the public sector as well as the private sector invests, because once there is more and increased investment, it is almost like a flood that begins to lift all boats. So the boats cannot be lifted if there's just one stream of water coming in. You need streams of water coming in from all sides so that all boats can be lifted, more employment can be created, and then through that we're also able to have more money to roll out more skills development and all that.
So you're saying energy skills are what the president was referring to when he said that we are determined to work with the private sector to remove the obstacles to investment. Are those the obstacles? And are those the only obstacles?
What if you listen to the president carefully, he says we are prepared to work with them, and to this end he also wants to have a meeting with them. Because in that meeting, in the presidential working group or the summit that he will hold, that is when the private sector will have an opportunity to raise other issues. Some of the issues that they raise are the regulatory constraints. And the government is determined to address those regulatory constraints that they cite, and we want to listen more carefully. And they also cite the deficit trust between government and business. And through these meetings, through the summit that will be held, that's when all that will also be addressed.
Well, I'm joined here in the studio to make sense of some of the comments of the Deputy President there, but also perhaps to decode for us some of the things that he said. I'm joined here in the studio by Professor Sipho Siepe as well as Ralph Mateja. Thanks to both of you for coming. And let's get straight to it. Help me, please. I just got a sense, I tried as hard as I could and as politely as one could, to get a sense from the Deputy President about whether, in fact, you know, having said everything, challenges of energy, of skills and all those things, you know, I mean, you have a business community that's sitting in like trillions of rands, that it is not investing or reinvesting in our economy. And not even once was he prepared to sort of take a bit of a harder line, you know, to say, but guys, you know, seriously now. And my reading of what President Zuma was saying was that was in the clip we played earlier, where he was saying we want them to show the same level or kind of commitment that the public sector is showing. To me, it was really saying, business, you're not coming to the party. But the president, the deputy president felt, that's not what he was saying.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we get from the State of the Nation address is at least for once we had focus on the economy. And the president was very clear about what are the sources of our problems. Both he started by indicating that you have external challenges, which has to do with the global downturn and also low demand on our products and services. But then he zeroed on the local challenges. One, labor instability, referred to the long strike to say we need to address that matter. Then second one is the issue of low level of investment. And most importantly, when he came to that, when he was spelling out what the challenges are. And those challenges are not new, but you saw the president inviting business. He was, you see, in the past, the business was always accused. But what you have a certain humility that emerges from the ANC to simply saying we don't have all the answers. But this is what we can do as government. This is our investment in the last 5 years. This will be our investment in the next coming 3 years. And that you as business, you have talked about the binding constraints. We acknowledge them, energy. We acknowledge the issue of other obstacles that he didn't spell. But I saw this as an invitation to a solution. No arrogance, and the posture of the president and the posture of the deputy president is that of people who are saying, we want to talk to craft a solution that is sustainable. And the people know that ultimately it's not the theories in the book. It will be through the contestation of ideas and the exchange of ideas that you'll find the possibility of addressing the challenges of unemployment and poverty and inequality.
Ralph?
Yeah, well, you know, I think the deputy president is treading very carefully not to try to banish the private sector. You could actually say that if you look at what's happening in South Africa, to some extent, you could say the private sector is almost holding everyone ransom. But they do have reasons for that. You correctly stated they're sitting on a pile of cash. They are not investing it. There are a couple of reasons that could be raised to that. But the chief one, it's about the policy stability in the country. What drives the private sector's investment, it's not the same motive as government. Government has a moral obligation to throw money into the public through public expenditure, infrastructure program, and drive the economy. The private sector has no such moral obligation. It looks at the bottom line. And if you want to look at an environment that will protect your bottom line, those competitive advantages that used to exist in South Africa, they are no longer there for you. The energy supply used to be one of the competitive advantages of this economy. We have seen in the past where some of aluminium smeltering companies will decide to come and work in South Africa because of the constant supply of energy. The demand has grown. We are no longer able to cope with that. But another more critical thing here, it is the trust, not the trust between business and government, but the trust between government and the general citizenry. Because if you are in a country where this trust is declining, you will have a very unstable policy implementation environment. You cannot give anyone a guarantee that if they throw in 20 billion of their money into this, whatever US dollars or pounds into the economy, you cannot give that guarantee that there will be sufficient political stability to see through that kind of investment.
Well, it's interesting you make that point, because I didn't then get from the deputy president, or the president for that matter, a thing that then says that we are as prepared to pacify the South African general populace, especially the poor and the working class, just as we are prepared to go out of our way to make sure that we address the concerns that business has. I didn't get that.
Yeah, I think,
or not to the extent that I got it from.
I think that's very important. And I guess when the president says it's economy and nothing more, he was dealing more with policy issues. But the issue of trust is very important. And you could actually say, even when you talk about service delivery, it is more the breakdown of that trust. And if you have to invest in an environment where there is that social instability, you see, the president talked about labor instability, but we should actually also be talking about social instability. Yes. And you do not want to have situations where people are going to be, suppose you are an investor in health and you start putting money into clinics. And then the second day,
they'll be bent down.
They are bent down. You are an investor from Europe, you want to put libraries, and they're bent down. So that is one of the, I think, one of the lacuna in the State of the Nation address. But at the same time, the president did mention at least the importance of addressing the municipalities, which is also important because those who are closer to the people and they should be able to deal with that. But I do think that should be very central in terms of talking about the people, because democracy is about the people.
Councillor, I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts right there. We're going to take a quick ad break. We'll be back right after this.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
Jill Marcus is warning that the industrial action will weigh on the current account. Now, it reflects the degree to which South Africa is importing more than it exports.
More discriminatory investors will avoid placing money in SA bonds and equities and go elsewhere, given the fragility of the country's twin deficits.
The strike has already impacted negatively on economic growth, but it hasn't had a big impact on export data just yet.
Primetime News, daily at 6 p.m. on SABC News.
Why doesn't the media reach out to the kids?
I think the media is trying to reach out. Unfortunately, the media is trying to reach out on very negative issues.
Absolutely.
Only.
How do you feel about the media coverage leading up to?
Disappointed.
Very disappointing,
very disappointing.
Indeed.
My problem was that became the story about hunger rather than hunger. And
Absolutely.
I'm just a bit find it bizarre that we worry more about if a celebrity X can go and make it on $1 a day than the 840 million people around the world who have that every day. So that is where media, in my opinion, again, got the issue wrong.
Watch Media Monitor with me, Alicia Jali, Sundays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News channel.
Welcome back, and if you've just joined us, I'm in conversation with some of our country's foremost analysts, and we're picking up on issues raised during our State of the Nation address, but also asking whether, in fact, people like Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa, Julius Malema, the Commander-in-Chief of the Economic Freedom Fighters, as well as Mmusi Maimane, the leader of the official opposition in Parliament, are they the real deal from what they have said or they have been saying over the past couple of weeks? Are these the people that we can entrust our future with? I just wanted you, Ralph, to quickly sort of finish your point on the trust deficit, especially as it relates to government versus communities.
Trust has become the most sought after commodity in any political system. If you look across, I'll give a simple example about Brazil. The next time you're going to offer the World Cup or you're going to come up with such kind of an investment, you're going to look as to whether government has got the trust with the people. Because if government does not have that rapport with the people or that level of trust is declining, what that says is that you cannot sustain policy implementation in that environment. It doesn't really matter what kind of policy you are talking about. You just need a stable environment. So I think that in this State of the Nation, the president was not forthright on that. He needs, and the governing party need to understand that this is very critical. Trust is very critical because it is only through trust that you can sustain policy implementation. The private sector need that kind of an assurance so that they know that if you put the machinery here, if you put a plant there, it's not going to be caught in this trust tension between citizens and government.
Well, we're going to see if indeed what the government is promising to do in order to allay some of those fears is in fact what the country needs and what business and indeed South Africans in general need. Because the Deputy President, who is also the leader of government business, a job, of course, that entails ensuring that cabinet ministers do their parliamentary work. How is he going to crack the whip and get the members of the executive not to take parliament for granted? And those are some of the questions I put to him, and this is what he had to say. When one looks at some of the problems, shall we call them some of the PR disasters that we've seen recently, a lot of them could actually be traced to the way ministers are doing, or shall we say, not doing their job. One would look at the Ngandla saga as an example. One could look at the appointment of the National Director of Public, or in fact several National Directors of Public Prosecutions as another example. What are you going to do?
Well, I think we should not confuse the roles of leader of government business and the role that the executive plays. Leader of government business is in relation to Parliament. And what you're talking about, the actual performance of ministers, the appointment of all these people.
Let me explain.
It's in relation to the executive, to the role in the executive, so the two need to be sort of separated.
Well, here's why I'm raising this, Mr. Deputy President. It is because in some instances, in my view, the failure to account to Parliament properly, in my view, could have averted some of the things we've seen. So I'm not just talking about their work as ministers, but the requirement to come and account to Parliament. Had they done that and done it properly and timeously, they could have avoided some of the PR disasters we've seen around the examples I've mentioned.
Well, let me just explain how we're going to try to work in the fifth administration. What happened in the fourth administration. We're now in the fifth administration, and the Deputy President is in charge or runs the government business in relation to Parliament, is to make sure that, yes, ministers answer questions in Parliament, and we work well with Parliament, and there's a smooth communication and cooperation between Parliament and the executive. And that has been done fairly well in the past, and I will continue with that process quite easily. But the more important and new way that we are going to work is how ministers are going to now be more accountable, particularly to the president. The ministers are going to be meeting with the president and the deputy president and outline precisely what they are going to do in implementing the National Development Plan and the manifesto of the ruling party. They're going to sign contracts with the president, and flowing from that, they are going to be required to implement their programs, and all that will be consolidated in the medium-term strategic framework, which is really the program that government has set out for the next 5 years. And there will then be increased accountability, an accountability model or framework which was inaugurated by President Zuma when he established the Ministry of Monitoring and Evaluation. And that ministry, which resides in the presidency, is now going to be able to follow through the performance of ministers of various departments, and on a periodic basis there will be active assessment and evaluation of ministers by the president, and we will then be able, the deputy president working with the president, will then be able to ensure that ministers do live up to their commitments, live up to what is set out in the agreement with the president. And so that is the real exciting part, which is going to put the performance of government on a better and firmer trajectory going forward. And all this is being done in the aid of making sure that we deliver what we said we would.
And do not undermine Parliament, including opposition parties. Because, I mean, when one looks at some of the problems that we've seen over the years, there are people who feel that actually the rot set in, so to speak, when members of the executive started undermining Parliament. And by that, I mean specifically members of the opposition, for example, who would be raising pertinent questions, but because they do not belong to the governing party, ministers dismiss them. Sometimes they don't even show up. And these have been some of the problems. And not showing up for committees and for Parliament is, in fact, your responsibility.
We are now in the 5th administration, and we are going to work to ensure that we implement government program, and the government program, embedded in it is increased accountability, it's increased transparency. We want to see people who are deployed in government being accountable and doing their work, and the president is very clear on this. So in the new administration, we're going to see quite a lot of action taking place. And all this is not just a statement in itself. It is to ensure that we deliver a better life to our people. That's what it is all about.
Got a sense of a deputy president who's saying, the problems you're talking about belong to the last administration, which I wasn't part of that. Let's talk about this administration that I'm part of. And I'm saying to you, none of the things that you've alluded to are going to happen again. And without saying it, or not in as many words, but I'm here now, and the things you're talking about are not going to happen again. Am I misreading him?
Yeah, no, actually you read him quite well. But there's nothing that he had said that was not said. Actually, the issue of accountability started with Mandela. Yeah, it came with President Mbeki. The only innovation that occurred under President Zuma was to establish the Department of Monitoring Evaluation.
And getting people to sign contracts.
Having people to sign contracts. So there's nothing that was done. You could give him the benefit of the doubt that the fourth administration, it was a new innovation and people did not know how it would pan out. But it's still encouraging to know that the whole notion of assessment becomes important. But also one must also pay attention to the fact that there are other institutions that have been monitoring. You have the Public Service Commission, you have the Auditor General, and most of those reports deal with activities that the government is supposed to do. And when you look at the Auditor General, he actually said, I'm willing to assist you the previous Auditor General. These are the things that I expect the accounting officers to do month after month. So if the Deputy President is very serious and the President is serious about accountability, they need to implement. It's not new ideas. It's simply implementation and making sure that there's also performance management, but also where people fail. I mean, there are serious levels of even conceptual and intellectual incompetence that are demonstrated. If you keep people there, you actually destroy the possibility, even the promise that the Deputy President talks about.
Now, as someone who's going to have to crack the whip, right? He has sort of some baggage of his own. Marikana is still hanging, you know, like an albatross around his neck. The strike that was that came to an end today. I mean, he's a shareholder with Lawnmen. There's other issues like, you know, the famous bull. In fact, speaking of that bull, last year I did, of course, ask him about that the bidding for the bull, and here's what he had to say. And thereafter, I'm going to ask you something very specific, Ralph. That if someone is prepared to bid for a bull for millions of rands, then their outlook, you know, the way they live their lives, the way they relate to other people, is a different matter altogether.
I understand that. I mean, obviously there is a great sensitivity, and coming just to this issue of the buffalo bull, I mean, as it was raised at the time, I finally did apologize, and many people have criticized me for apologizing because they've said, but it is a business decision. You're a farmer and you buy these animals because you want the best genetics, and when they have progeny, you sell that. It is a business. It's like, you know, you buy a big machinery for a lot of money and you make things with it and you sell whatever you produce. And they said, that's how you should have approached it. And I said to them, I could not sound arrogant to the masses of our people at the time and give that type of explanation, because many people had died in Marikana, and I did not want to try and give justification for that. And that's why I apologized. But the reality of the matter is that I'm a farmer, and I run farming as a business. And bidding for that animal meant that I saw a business opportunity, but at the time I could not put that argument forward because people would have said, he's being arrogant now. But now I can give the explanation and say it is a business. And hopefully, you know, things have quietened down a bit.
There you go. That was the explanation on the bull thing. Is that the kind of explaining that you think is going to make this man the kind of person that people, ANC people and South Africans are going to look forward to and say, he represents everything that we are about, that we stand for, that we aspire to, and all of that?
Well, no one is perfect. I mean, Mr. Ramaphosa has been in business for quite a while. He brings an understanding of business into government. But in relation to this specific issue, it is the timing. It is at that time in South Africa when you could say that the poor are becoming increasingly more intolerant of people who are flaunting their wealth in the country. And because of that reason, to some extent, he could appear as a liability to what is happening, where the ANC has to mediate between business and even labor. You look at the ongoing strike, for example. My interpretation of the strike that has just ended, it's not just because of the demands that were made. It's not because of the hard position by the union that it has to deal strictly with the demands, the wage demand. It has a lot to do with that trust issue where you have other political parties that are questioning the moral stand of the ANC as a representative of the workers and also of the poor. And Mr. Ramaphosa's name always comes forth in that. It doesn't mean he cannot overcome that. He has to engage with the people as well and try to provide his own explanation further. It's not going to stick once. He's going to have to explain trying this more and more to demonstrate that he can actually overcome that and see to the interest of the poor. He has to earn it.
And that's exactly, that's exactly why I was playing that clip, Prof, because the last clip is what the Deputy President said to us shortly, in fact, a couple of days after he was elected Deputy President of the ANC in Mangaung, right? Fast forward to what he was saying yesterday in the interview that we had. And not much has changed in terms of the sort of values that he puts before others, or how he carries himself, or how he explains himself even. And I'm saying that in the light of having a Musi Maimane who's going to make a lot of noise in Parliament, a Julius Malema who's not going to shut up in Parliament, and them saying we stand for, or we are unapologetically for the masses of our people and nobody else, right? So I'm saying in that context, is he doing justice to his own and to the ANC's cause? The ANC, the Deputy President.
Well, I want to pick up on what Ralph says, because there's also, I think we are also being unfair to the Deputy President, because if you had to play the clip of him when he was a leader of NUM, you get a different picture. If you look at him when he was a negotiator, you get a different picture.
But politics have changed completely.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that he has occupied a number of positions, and that require your posture to change. And but what is most important is the humility that he shows, the sensitivity that he brings. And if you want to talk about unifying South Africans, and from different levels, whether they are university students, he was an activist at that level, whether these are mine workers, whether these are unions, you have somebody who has been there and seen it all. So one hopes that all these various personal experiences and the personal location in terms of where he was will actually bring a rounded person. But I have confidence from the perspective that it is humble to accept that that may not have been wise. And I think the challenge that he's going to face will continue to sharpen him. And ultimately, what he brings is hope. It is up to him to fail us.
Ralph?
Yeah, I really think that he will evolve. And also those who criticize him, they are not the most righteous person, economically and even morally. I mean, if I were to look at some of the members of parliament and some of the politicians in this country and ask for their tax returns and ask how much do they have themselves, you might find out that, there are a lot of people who we could say they cannot speak on behalf of the poor. I think that it's very important to give him a chance. And his journey, perhaps, the journey in South Africa of emerging from the trade union, going into politics, becoming a business person, perhaps it's a journey that is worth looking at. It's a journey that is worth studying.
Probably necessary even for someone playing that kind of a leadership role. Well, we will see. It's time to take a quick ad break. This conversation continues.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
Well, another new kid on the block is the DA's parliamentary leader, Musi Maimane. His maiden speech was a response to the president's State of the Nation address. Here are some excerpts.
The people of South Africa waited for the Honourable President to address the significant government failures in education. How does the department, with the biggest budget from our national fiscus and the biggest budget in Africa, deliver the worst maths and science education on the entire continent? Only 3% of grade 9 learners passed the numeracy test in the 2013 annual national assessment. Of the 1.2 million learners who registered for grade 1 in 2002, More than half of these learners have dropped out of the school system before they get to grade 12. Only 34% of learners who started school passed matric in 2013. These statistics, honorable members, must shame every single one of us. And yet, they were completely ignored in yesterday's address. It is a consequence of this government's refusal to impose mandatory standards on teachers and its refusal to take action when results started to dip. The president said very little, 2 lines in fact, about violent crime that keeps our communities living in fear. He made only passing reference to corruption, which cost the people of this country 30 billion rands a year. This money should have been spent on schools, clinics, housing, policing, and health provision. Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, the president said nothing about corruption in this government, which I believe really begins right at the top. South Africa is very well versed in scandal after scandal that must be attributed to this administration. The public protector has spoken. I now request that President follow suit and speak. The people of this nation have absolutely no explanation from their president on the damning allegations against the property built in Nkandla. Until the Honorable President fully explains himself on the undue benefit from state funds to his personal property amounting to millions of rands, South Africans cannot trust the words spoken from him. For this reason, honorable members, we must see the re-establishment of the Nkandla Ad Hoc Committee in this 5th Parliament. The president did talk a lot about local government, and what he did not mention was that 4 out of the 11 municipalities he listed last night are DA governed, and that the consistently best performing municipalities in the country were not even on his list. For the NDP to succeed, it is our view that we need to send our best to local government in order to deliver what the dreams and the ambitions of our people. Last night, the president spoke about cleaning up. His speech was an ideal opportunity for him to come clean about South Africa, come clean about our economic crisis, come clean on job creation, come clean on the electricity crisis, come clean on the failing education system, come clean on the public protector's report, come clean on the National Director of Public Prosecutions, but he did not. Instead, he offers out future plans and the promise to hold his cabinet ministers to performance contract. Well, Chairperson of the National Council of Province, this notion is welcome. But where are these terms of agreements? Who will judge their performances? How will people ensure that these are properly upheld? And what about the performance agreements signed 5 years ago?
Well, Musa Maimane, the leader of the official opposition in Parliament, did he say the right thing, struck the right chord? Is he the guy?
Well, you know, I listened to Musa Maimane before the president spoke, and I listened also to Helen Zille. And they emphasized that the president must be bold about the economy. And I listened to them after the president spoke. Then they both acknowledged that he was bold, but they are not sure he's going to follow through with what he... But what you have is that you can't help the opposition. Its position is to be oppositional. So even where there's a need to acknowledge, you find that there's always a failure. But I also understand that if you have spent the last 6 months taking the men, you're not going to say anything positive. I was actually impressed more by Terra Lekota, who acknowledged that at least you talked about the economy. I mean, if you listen to other people. So Musa Maimane had to sound like the DA. And I would have wanted something that says, I hear you, but here's a better advice. Come up with the other, if you say you failed in this, because this is ultimately our country. Make suggestions so that you are listened to and indicate that these are the weaknesses. And if you are so concerned about success of this country, at least come up with better proposals. But simply rehashing, I mean, there's nothing that you said there that I've not, on education, almost every educationalist will tell you the same. So it is almost rehashing the same old. So one expects the opposition that is much more smarter. And Musa Maimane is a very smart fellow, very eloquent, and he can actually do better.
Hello?
It's quite difficult to us to be given a space to govern and also assess what has been happening. I think this is the conundrum that the opposition find itself in, because first of all, they speak in more specific terms about what has failed around education. Some months ago, the Premier Helen Zille came and defended the Minister of Education as well, saying that it's quite a complex issue. It is a concurrent function at national and at province. It's quite complex. But one thing that is quite distinct about the DA as an opposition, and it's emerging as you look at other opposition, is that they are not saying everything else has failed. I mean, you have different schools of thought. There are those who believe everything else has failed. They are not saying everything else has failed. They are saying that give us a chance, we will do better. But one thing they are not doing as well, they are not proposing anything new. They are saying that they could better implement what is already in place. They do not disagree with the fundamentals of what is in place. They want a chance to be able to take it further. That seems to be their submission. If you look at other opposition parties, which we might, those are saying that nothing works.
But is Mose Maimane going himself, the man, the politician, and now the leader of the DA in Parliament, is he going to make a difference?
Well, I think his posture is very different. I mean, if you listen to when he started, first you acknowledge the president. You don't denigrate. You show actually respect.
Well, and to acknowledge the president.
And he started doing that. And also to simply say, I hope we can work together. There is that element. And I think he's smart enough to know that, and he'll soon learn that the best way of influencing policy is to assist your opposition, because ultimately, if it's a bad policy, it affects everybody, whether the person is a member of the DA, whether a member of EFF or a member of the ANC. So when people look at Parliament, and this is one of the things that...
But is that realistic though, Prof? Because, I mean, politics is about getting the other guy out and
I'll
putting
give
me in.
I'll give you an example on the information bill. If you talk to the DA, it will tell you that when the bill started, it was so bad. And they actually talked to the members of the ANC, explained, and ultimately what became what they call watered down, although they are not satisfied. They say it's much better. And it is because of the working relationship that they established in the working committees.
Is Mose Maimane the real deal?
He's coming out well, and I think that one thing about him is that he doesn't go all out to denigrate, as Prof is saying. He does have that conciliatory tone to say, you know, we can work together and do this. And there is a sense of common ownership that I've heard him striking there, talking about education, say that we cannot be proud of that. There is that sense of ownership. So I think as a young politician in Parliament, working with other members from other political parties, he's likely to maintain that tone. And we need to know something about the DA as well, worth noting, is that they've got incredible research support. They are always on the issues, and if you look at some of their papers, their contribution to committees, you see a lot of substance. You might disagree with what they say, of course, but there is that technical work, and if he gets that support in Parliament, I think he will be able to make that incremental contribution.
Okay, we'll see. Mose Maimane is who we're talking about. Up next, we're talking about Julius Malema.
SABC, sharing 20 years of inspiration.
Have we seen the last of you in politics?
I don't know. No, I'm just okay now with the work that I'm doing. Let me just do one thing at a time. So I don't have any plans for politics.
Watch Question Time with me, Mpho Tsedu, Monday to Thursday at 5:30 p.m. on the SABC News Channel.
Well, Economic Freedom Fighters leader Julius Malema's maiden speech on the day of the State of the Nation debate ruffled a lot of feathers. He accused the ANC of murdering mine workers in Marikana, an accusation which obviously did not sit well with the governing party.
Our people mandated this movement, the EFF, to come and speak on behalf of the homeless, the landless, domestic workers, security guards, farm workers, cleaners, waiters and waitresses, recipients of social grants, construction workers, the unemployed and poverty-stricken masses of our people who are forgotten by the ruling elite, which is in bed with the oppressors and the imperialist forces. I thought it was going to be difficult for me to carry this mandate with a serious commitment against the party which taught me everything I know today about politics. But this was made easy by seeing Mr. Martinus van Schalkwyk on the benches of the ruling party. I then quickly remembered that, by the way, we are not opposing the ANC we joined then, the ANC of Lawrence Pukanuke, but we are opposing the ANC of Martinus van Schalkwyk and Cyril Ramaphosa. Mr. President, when you spoke yesterday, you reaffirmed this belief that indeed we have chosen the correct path because you no longer represent the hope of the hopeless masses of our people. Your speech yesterday was uninspiring and lacked the central theme, Mr. President. No one will remember what you said last night except that we should clean on Mandela Day, which was the only emphasis you made, and maybe because you thought it was the simplest subject you had to deal with in the whole speech last night. What was supposed to be the simplest subject for you has proven to be more complex than you thought, Mr. President, because your cleaning instruction goes against the wishes of President Mandela, who said it must be left to individuals' choice on how they wish to remember him or celebrate his life. I'm sorry, Mr. President, I won't be cleaning on Mandela Day. I will be involved in a more productive activities which will leave long-lasting legacy and remembrance of our world icon. And those activities will, amongst others, include the rebuilding of mud schools in the Eastern Capes and
a point of order, please.
On a point of order, Tate Malema, please.
Honorable Chairperson, the Speaker called the Deputy President of the Republic, Cyril Ramaphosa, and I think he's honorable as the member of this House. Can you rule on that? Thank you.
Honorable Malema, the Honorable Deputy President of this House is an honorable member of this House.
No problem, Honorable Cyril Ramaphosa. Mr. President, you tried to speak about radical socio-economic changes in your speech last night, but nothing you said was radical. Instead, we had a repetition of what has been said before. I know very well that your attempt to make radical economic changes your central theme in your speech last night was a direct response to the existence of EFF or even an attempt to delegitimize it, but you successfully failed in the same way you failed when you introduced the red beret to counter that of the EFF during elections campaign. You and your party should stop playing with semantics, especially when it relates to a radical economic agenda, because you lack courage and you have sold out the revolution. You don't have what it takes to lead the struggle for economic emancipation of black majority, particularly Africans. You are extremely scared of white people, particularly white monopoly capital. You have in the past 20 years defended the privileges of white minority and continue with the exploitation and exclusion of oppressed black majority. The reason for such is because the elite pact that was forced upon the people in 1994 does not allow for radical economic transformation and changes. The pact defends the colonial and apartheid ownership patterns of the means of production, including property. The ANC is part of an elite pact that seeks to protect white monopoly capital and white minority privileges. And this has led to the formation of the EFF because there was a political vacuum and nature does not allow a vacuum.
The language he speaks, the issues he raises, his gestures and mannerisms, is it what EFF supporters actually sent him to Parliament to do?
That's the main question. What are the expectations of EFF supporters? And what I've seen so far is that he does raise the issues, but the manner in which he raises them and the etiquette in Parliament, there are rules in Parliament. I remember very well when I was debating with one of EFF members on one of the SABC network, he kindly requested me to call him an honorable member because he has been a member of Parliament. I apologized, said, oh, I'm sorry. But now you have their leader as well going there, violating the very same rules that they demand be applied to them. So at this point, it's still entertaining. You need to be able to come to the substance. And I think why it's like this now is this tussle that is emerging as to who owns this radical language of economic transformation. That the ANC is talking about it, EFF is talking about it. We are still at that level. We haven't gotten to the level of the issues where we could say we are seeing a substantial contribution of EFF in Parliament. I mean, they have 6%. Any motion can be passed in Parliament without them.
True that.
They will not gain much by working out more than they've already done. So it's about how they can work with other committee members in committees.
Yeah, I think in terms of drama and theatre, you have to give it to the EFF. But you see, Parliament is a place where laws are made and regulations and all that. And if you want to influence that, drama does not assist. So there are issues that are pertinent that he raises, which are very critical. I mean, the whole notion even of the Mandela Day. What he says is that if you listen to Mandela, he calls for something much more radical. You just go to the speech that they gave in Rivonia trial, where he talks about land, he talks about the economy, he talks about the inequalities and all that. And he's simply saying, let's not trivialize that. And I'm not saying the president trivializes. That could be one step in which we can show. But Malema simply says, let's actually do more. But the manner in which he raises it almost undermines what he wants to portray. But there's the issue of patterns of productions, the social relations around the economy. Those are very critical issues. But you could say that without being the way he is. But I should also say one thing, that what you see in Malema is a product of the ANC. That level of rhetoric is a rhetoric that he learned very well. And as he said in the speech, that I stand here having to speak against a movement that has made me who I am.
No, he has his own, that's why I began by asking you the way I'm asking, because he has his own explanation as to why he is behaving the way he did. And he didn't say this after the fact. In other words, after all the drama of last week where he was even expelled, right, from the House. He said it, a couple of months in the run-up to the election. I had an interview with him. And then I said to him, well, you'll be coming to this parliament. He says, yeah, I'm coming to this parliament. But he predicted that he was going to be expelled because he knew exactly how he was going to conduct himself and why. Look, listen to this. This is how he explained it himself. Behind you are pictures of Parliament.
Yeah.
A place that can be quite...
This is going to be my home for the next 5 years.
It's going to be your home for the next 5 years. Let's really see that. Now, it can be a humbling home, if I may say that. Someone like, there are people who have traveled the same route that you've traveled.
Yeah.
Someone like Holomisa, for example, was expelled from the ANC, was popular inside and outside of the ANC, went to form his own party, got, I think, something like 14 seats in the National Assembly the first time he contested elections. Right now, he only has about 5. So Parliament can really be humbling. There are realities in Parliament that go beyond your intelligence, that go beyond what you have to offer, the things you are able to say, no matter how strong and no matter how people receive those utterances well. But it can actually reduce you to something you would not have thought you would be.
I will never comply to rules that don't make sense. For sure, I'm going to be expelled here again. I've never been like that from when I was very young. If you say I must not do 1, 2, 3, why? What are the politics of me not doing what you are saying? I must not. You must, without emotional blackmail and all sorts of things, first you must motivate politically. Why? So this is going to be an activist parliament. If people are marching outside and parliament is sitting, we are going to leave our seats and march with them. And if that will lead to expulsion, let them expel us. We will never lose our contact with the masses on the ground, because that's what the majority of our people did when they came here. They think being honorable means losing touch with the poor of the poorest. We will go into protesting communities and lead them, even when we are in parliament. Many of them think that the only way to raise the issues of those who are marginalized is through speaking in parliament. You must be with them on the ground. You must consistently keep in touch with the people. I'm not for benefits. If I was for benefits, I would have remained in the ANC and die being on my knees begging and all that. I've been like this Vuyo throughout my life. Those who know me, they will tell you that I don't easily comply, especially with the state rules which are aiming at reinforcing capitalism. I want a people's parliament. I want an activist parliament. And this is what this house must become. Not some conservative type of a gentleman ladies arrangement. We want the people to see themselves in us when we are in parliament and say, this is who we are. We shouldn't be a reflection of some a British parliament. I'm not that type. I will never comply with that. And they must be ready here. I was in the ANC. I articulated the issues that the people were raising on the ground, even when the ANC was uncomfortable with such articulations, and that led to my expulsion. So if speaking for the people will lead to me being expelled in this parliament, and advocating for what people of Deep Slot and Moiplas and Alexander and Tembisa want, then hard luck. Then I will go back and then be a leader of a party in Braamfontein without leading from parliament. But I'm not to be threatened by laws which are not aiming at uplifting the conditions of our people. If you say, Julius, don't do this, how does that help the poor people on the ground? Not some British apartheid, images. I don't want that. I will never be part of such things.
So, the expulsion was to be expected.
Yeah, but he's consistent about one thing, which the ANC must be careful of, or even COSATU. He's assuming the role of leading the working class, leading the poor, leading the unemployed, etc. And the more he says it, the more people might start believing it. So I think the ANC must wake up and COSATU must wake up to that.
Will he serve him and his party?
Well, for his party, they're getting the publicity they want. And the most important thing for them is to maintain that image that says we are not going to be rehabilitated by Parliament. We will be who we are in Parliament. And I think if they keep on pushing against the rule further and further and further, they might be able to make some gains going forward.
Well, with these three gentlemen, how will Parliament change?
Well, I think there's something that we must protect. We must protect the institution. It doesn't matter what we do, what our beliefs are. There are rules, there are of engagement. And if you're going to be in Parliament, we expect a certain decorum. And if you're going to call somebody an honorable person, then we expect the behavior to be also honorable.
Well,
yeah, Parliament is already gaining, and I think South Africans are also taking much interest with this party, EFF. I think that it will boost oversight, but they're going to have to learn to do it even when it comes to in the committees and maybe propose their own legislations as well instead of just reacting to other people's proposal. So I think at the end, citizens will gain out of this.
Although private members' bill have no history of really going through, of being successful. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We've run out of time, unfortunately. Well, that's where we're going to end it for this evening. Join us again tomorrow, same time, 9 p.m. here on Channel 404. From me, Vuyo Mvoko, it's a good night.